So hi, Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope everyone is here and they're with me and they're ready to begin the session. All right, just before we begin, I'd like to inform all of you that we're going to be using the chat box here as our primary mode of communication. And if anyone of you wants to add something over voice or video to the presentation or to the entire session, then please feel free to do so, but just make sure to raise your hand on the Zoom client before I can hand you over the floor so you could address everyone as well. I hope that's clear to everyone. So let me just start sharing my screen and I think we can begin. Okay, brilliant. So is my screen visible to everyone?
Yes, it's visible.
Right, wonderful. So just before I begin and we can dive into this masterclass, I'd like to first give you an overview of what we're going to be talking about today, about who I am and why I'm relevant to be speaking to you guys, and also a little bit about the Linkstar team who've been kind enough to invite me for this session. So yeah, without further ado, let's begin. Samir, just before we begin, I'd also like you to, I think, maybe have like a little foreword to the entire session, if there's anything that you want to include, and then we can start.
Nothing for now. Just the assignment we will be sharing in the at the end of the session.
Brilliant. I think that sounds wonderful. Thank you very much, Samir. Okay, so looks like we have a good number of people in the session here as well. And let's turn on our chat box here as well so that I can see what you guys are going to be including. And perfect. So let's begin. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. First of all, welcome to this this incredible masterclass that Linkstar has been very kind to organize. My name is Muhammad Ali Khan. I'm going to be your instructor for the next 60 minutes. And we're going to try to wrap this up hopefully within the next 60 minutes. The reason we're calling this a masterclass is because all of the subjects that I intend to communicate to you and all of the things that we intend to speak to you about, generally, they all require classes and sessions of their own. But again, because this is a masterclass, we're going to be covering as much as we can within this limited time. I'm currently working with JS Bank. I am AVP and Manager Communications over there, primarily looking after corporate communications, and also I'm double hatting as a brand manager for the digital financial services. This includes Roshan Digital Account and other digital products essentially that the bank has to offer. Prior to this, I used to work with advertising. I was with Synergy Dentsu, and then I was also with Spectrum VMLY&R. At both places, I was heading strategy. Because I had started my career in advertising as a creative, that's where the whole marriage between strategy and strategic development of communication and creative interpretation and manifestation essentially comes into play. I'm also an instructor. I teach at Zabist University as well as the Indus Valley School of Art. I teach creative strategy over there and at Zabist, various different subjects, all revolving around the media sciences and the advertising sphere. So yeah, that's generally about me and myself. So yeah, let's begin on what we're going to talk about. So just a little quote that I wanted to share with all of you. And I think it's very interesting to sort of put ourselves in this mindset before we can start talking about why we need to build, what we need to build, and what are we going to cover essentially. If you want someone to remember your message in a presentation, an article, or a report, tell them a story. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of being able to tell a story. What does that mean, telling a story? So by the way, I'm going to be bilingual with you guys so that most of you can also understand in our local language here. I think, is that okay, Samir?
No, we have international audience as well, so English should be the mode of communication. So yeah.
Okay, brilliant, wonderful. So if we have audiences joining from overseas, there's nothing like it as well. So um, anyway, let's move forward. Storytelling. Storytelling is that mode of communication that you're going to use, that style of communication when you're addressing any kind of an audience, whether it's being in a boardroom and talking to a client, or whether it's connecting with potential partners, or whether it's talking to the audiences that you aim to reach out to in terms of the mass media. It's important to be able to tell a story, but why am I telling you this? And why are we essentially starting from here? I think it's very important to bear in mind. We're talking about communication design. Now, design in and of itself is a manifestation of strategically developed messages, right? That's what communication is all about. When you talk about communication design, you're talking about the final output, right? About what the people are going to be looking at, what's the message that they're going to be getting, what are they going to be interacting with, or in other words, what we like to refer to as the consumer facing message. But you see, before we can craft the consumer facing message, it's very important to set our thoughts into order, to get our strategy into order so that we know what we're communicating and how we're going to communicate it essentially will be playing an impact in its manifestation. That's where communication strategy comes into play. The entire idea of communication strategy, before we can delve into communication design, is being able to determine not only who we're talking to or not what we're going to say, but also what is the context within which we're going to say it, and where are the places that we're going to be communicating whatever message that we want to. I'm going to be using lots of different examples, to aid my my session with you, and I'm also going to give you an overview of all of the different aspects that we're going to talk about. In this entire journey of storytelling, this being able to craft a story to communicate a message that we're essentially creating for audiences, it's important to remember that there is a whole market that that you're going to be communicating within. There's a whole category that you're doing so. You have competitors within the category, outside the category. All of these brands or communicators, and in fact, in today's day and age, even content creators for YouTube or for Facebook, we're all prying for one thing, that is the attention of a wider audience. Facebook makes its money that way. Um, Not only Facebook, in fact, all of the different social media platforms, that's how they make their money, right? Because they boast about the number of people on their platforms and how they are able to reach those people. And that's what attracts advertisers, because all of them want the attention of people. But you're not going to get their attention if you're not able to create a compelling enough story. But what does that mean? And how do you really create a story when all you need to communicate, for instance, is, hey, I want to sell a certain brand of toothpaste. Uh, how do I tell a story when I need to sell toothpaste? Because aren't people just worried about using the right kind of toothpaste? Isn't that it? Um, if you look away from toothpaste for a second and you think about, oh, okay, so let's sell a car. And selling a very nice luxury car, for instance, you start looking for what do people really want? And you start thinking about, okay, maybe people want a great car with lots of different features. So why not just communicate the features, right? Shouldn't that do the job? Shouldn't that sell the car? The truth is, no, it won't. And that's because people are not interested. You see, with the number of choices that people have, they can really do the research themselves. Consumers are not stupid. Consumers know what they're looking for. They know what they want. Um, and so when you place an ad in front of them, they know that they know that you're trying to sell them something. What's the point in then selling it to them if they don't want to look at the content, or if they know that, oh, they're just selling me something and I can just look for it on my own? Well, that's where storytelling comes in. That's where you can make your content compelling. And that's where content essentially comes in. Content. What is content? Oh, by the way, sorry, this is a slide that just introduces myself. I think and I know things. That's because I spend a lot of time talking to people and getting to know them. And you'll understand the reason why I've included the slide over here, talking to people and getting to know them. It's a very important a skill to have as a marketeer, as an advertising professional, because that's where you get the insights. And we'll talk about insights in just a moment. So I was talking about content. First things first, of course, what is content itself, right? And yeah, okay. So basically, it's anything that you find online and in any form, whether it's text, images, or videos. That's what content is. Content creators on YouTube are dealing with video content. When you go to other social media platforms, you have different kinds of content. You have video, you have images, you have audio, and then you have content on the ATL platforms as well, the above the line platforms, such as television or newspapers, or take the radio, for instance, right? It's all just filled with content. And this content needs to be compelling so that people are actually interested in what you have to say. Now, the question is, where does the strategy part come into the picture? And why is communication strategy important here? Well, that's when you plan to use your content to achieve your business goals. And I think that's a very important aspect of developing effective communication strategies, because you go to a brand and the brand says, hey, I'm launching a new product, a product that's already in the market, but this is the first time my company is launching it, and I want people to buy my product. So you have a business goal there, which is, hey, I need sales. But even before I can start generating sales, I need people to first know about my product. I want them to engage with my product. I want them to engage with me so that I can tell them more about what I'm offering, tell them more about myself, and well, essentially be able to sort of create a perception in their minds about who I really am and what is it that I'm offering. How are you going to do that as an advertising professional or as a communication specialist is you have to plan your content. But even before you get down to the generation and development of content, you need to plan what your message is going to be about and how are you going to communicate that message. That's because it attracts audiences on every stage of the funnel and keeps them engaged. The funnel. Now, I think the funnel is something so very interesting. And the reason I bring this up here is because this is something that will be driving our narrative from the very beginning of our communications to the very end of our communications. This is what the funnel looks like. So you have awareness, interest, consideration, evaluation, purchase, loyalty, advocacy. Now, all of what I'm communicating to you may sound very academic, but in reality, this is actually how people are driven towards a purchase and then towards the post-purchase phase, which is they will either be loyal to you or they will become advocates of you. And essentially, that's what we as marketeers or advertising professionals ultimately want from our audiences, for them to be able to become advocates of what you're selling. Because after a purchase, if the person is just not interested, then they've completely gotten out of the funnel. And that's something that we don't essentially want. One of the interesting things about the funnel and why we're talking about it is because the reason it's called a funnel is that after every stage, you will realize and you will notice that the number of people in each stage of this funnel gets lower and lower. So you will have more people in the awareness phase of your communications as compared to those who are interested in your communications. And then you'll have even less people in the consideration phase who are considering to make a purchase. And you will have even far fewer people making the purchase itself. And then, of course, fewer people who are loyal and even more fewer people who are advocates of what you're essentially offering. Someone says no sound. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, wonderful. So if anyone of you has questions along the way, please feel free to include it in the chat box, and then we can address them at the end of the session. Or if you want to add something during the session, please raise your hands as well. Okay, brilliant. So like I was saying, the reason we've talked about the funnel here is because when you start communicating a message to somebody, there's a whole process that they're going to go through. And they may not spend too much time in certain phases, but they will definitely be at some phase of, of the funnel in respect to the communication that you're sending out to them. How do we use the funnel effectively, and why are we talking about this? That's because, you see, when you craft a communication strategy, you need to think about what kind of people am I really talking to, or what phase of the funnel am I trying to get them to enter. Our efforts are always going to be to get people to not only enter the funnel, but to also push them through the funnel, because at some point there's the purchase. And we want that for the business, right? Because we're aligning our communications with what the business goals are. Let's take this forward now and let's talk about how we can use this funnel in order to craft our communication strategy. The reason we are building up on this funnel and we're talking about all of these different phases is because ultimately we've moved on from just being communicators of advertising. It's because connecting with a brand now is not just about sending a message to the people or crafting a strategy for a communication. It's about building a brand experience. Advertising and marketing are not the same anymore. They've actually evolved, and that evolution is visible in the way that people are now, reacting to brands, or the way that they're connecting with brands. So, how do we build a captivating communication or content strategy? Every content strategy must contain, number one, a clear objective, and that's always going to be the starting point for your communication strategy. What do I need to fulfill? What is it that I'm trying to achieve? Do I want people to buy the product? Do I want people at this phase to just learn about who I am? Do I want people to engage with me, to talk to me, to ask me questions? Do I want people to share my message with others? What is it that I'm trying to do? Once you set a clear objective, that's when you start thinking about market context. And I think this is the most important aspect of one of the most important aspects of building a communication strategy, is that you need to think about, okay, what market am I in and how do people really operate in this market? Let's take, for instance, let's take cars. We were talking about cars a moment ago. So in Pakistan, many of you, those of us who are joining us from Pakistan, will know that in the last few years, the prices of cars have really skyrocketed. They've very exponentially increased. Now, let's say there's a car company. Let's say it's Kia. So Kia comes out with a super luxury sedan, because in the Pakistani market, in terms of Kia's vehicles, you won't find sedans yet, because what they're offering is they have a hatchback called the Kia Picanto. They have a compact SUV called the Sportage, and then they have a smaller compact SUV called the Stonic. And then, of course, they have like a full-size SUV as well, which is the Sorento, and then they have the Carnival and the Grand Carnival, which are multi-purpose vehicles. They're larger vans, essentially. Now, let's say they come out with a sedan in the Pakistani market, and let's say it's the Stinger, which is it's an incredible car. They have a sports version of the car as well. It's really cool. But then you start thinking about, okay, well, how do I communicate this? And you say, oh, well, the car looks very nice. It's very attractive. It's very sporty. So maybe just create a campaign around maybe something like the new experience sports on the roads of Pakistan. I don't know, a message like that, for instance. Now, it's very easy to come up with a message like that, but is it really going to work? And will people really consider it if I am to create that kind of a communication strategy? That's where the market context comes. And you start thinking about, oh, okay, so, well, how big is the Pakistani automobile market? How many people are actually buying these cars? How many people are considering SUVs or CUVs? And you start thinking about in terms of sedans. Well, how many people are actually interested in sedans? How do people elevate their status in terms of buying cars? So what is that journey like? What is the consumer journey like? How are they going to connect? How are they going to buy a car? What is the process of buying a car in Pakistan? What is the whole automobile manufacturing scene like in Pakistan? You see, the reason I'm asking these questions is because it stimulates your mind. It kind of tells you that, oh, okay, so maybe you realize that for people in Pakistan, uh, being elitist means owning an SUV. Hmm, okay. Well, that's because people aspire for Land Cruisers and Toyota Fortuners or, bigger cars rather than a sedan. And you start thinking about that. Oh, okay. And how do you learn this? You learn this by looking at the market, seeing how the market operates. That's where market context essentially comes in. How should you conduct market research? That's a very big question. It's a very simple question, really, but one that people, I think, tend to oversimplify. Conducting market research does not just mean doing a Google search and just seeing the number of cars on the Pakistani roads or how many cars are being manufactured every year or how many say yes, they're all very important numbers. They're all part of your overall market research, but it's really much more than that. I think in order to craft a compelling communication strategy, it's important to talk to key players of the market. In our case, in the case of our example, one of the wisest things to do at the very beginning of your of developing your communication strategy would be actually walking into the market and visiting these showrooms of different car companies and talking to the salesmen over there, asking them, hey, what's so special about this car? Do people want to buy it? How do people react to it? When you're selling to people, how do they react to it? You could also go to used car showrooms and sit down with them and have those conversations with them and ask them, hey, so what kind of cars do people generally buy from you? Those people who are buying sedans, what cars did they previously have? Did most of them own hatchbacks or did most of them own other sedans? And when they're buying a sedan, what are they looking for? Are they looking for features? Are they looking for uh, comfort? Are they looking for luxury? What is important to them? And you will be surprised with the kind of insights that you can uncover just by talking to people, just by understanding how the market operates. In the case of our very same example, let's take another culture in the Pakistani automobile market. There's this thing in our market called on money. So on money is kind of like a premium that Pakistani car buyers have to pay in order to get a car before it's before time, or like, because usually when you walk into a showroom to buy a brand new car, you fill out the form, you pay them the money, and then they say, okay, well, we're going to deliver the car to you after so and so months. And let's say you don't want to wait for those many months and you just want it immediately. So you say, okay, I'm ready to pay you a premium, and then you can just give me the car immediately. And they say, okay. So what these showroom people have is they have investors who've already made purchases and already ordered those cars beforehand and parked those cars within the showrooms. For anyone who wants to buy a car immediately, they just pay the premium and they can get the car immediately. So you see what's happening there? So what we could have thought of something that's actually very simple: walk into a showroom, buy a car, test drive, buy a car, get out. It's actually not enough. You see, there's more to it. And you're going to find these things out only and only if you're actually in touch with the true market context. The next aspect here is competitors analysis. You want to be able to analyze your competitors, but you see, again, when we talk about competitors analysis, I think most marketers and most advertising professionals, they tend to oversimplify this. Competitors analysis is not just about conducting a SWOT analysis or just about looking at the communications and saying, oh, this is what they're talking about. Oh, hey, or hey, this is the kind of campaign that they're running these days. I think it's much more than that. When you conduct a competitors analysis, you want to be able to understand not just what your competitors are saying and doing, but also how are people reacting to your competitors. So take, for instance, since we're talking about automobiles, I'll use the automobile sector as an example. Take Kia. Kia talks about now, well, at least now it talks about the power of dreams, right? I'm sorry, that was Honda. Honda talks about the power of dreams. Kia talks about movement that inspires. And then you have Suzuki that talks about the way of life. Let's just take these three, for example, right now, right? So we know that Kia is positioned along the lines of inspiration, right? Movement that inspired. And we know that Honda talks about dreams, as like a master brand itself. And then we know that Suzuki talks about the way of life in terms of like a daily commute kind of car, like an everyman archetype. So it's pretty simple to just understand those that, hey, okay, so this is what they're essentially talking about. But you see, it goes much, much deeper than that. Um, you see, you think about, okay, what products do these people have? Do these companies have? If we're bringing out, let's say, the Stinger, what other sedans are available in the Pakistani market, and who are the ones selling them? And hey, how are they selling them? A very good example is, let's say, Chang'an. Chang'an is a Chinese company that recently came into Pakistan, and they launched a sedan called the Alswin. Now, the interesting thing about the Alswin, and if you take a look at their communications, is they have constantly talked about more space than a hatchback or a sedan in the price of a hatchback, is because they uncovered a very interesting insight, which is that most hatchback owners dream, or their aspiration is to have a sedan, because that's how the that's how the ladder of progress works for people in the automotive market. So for someone who has a hatchback, like let's say a Cultus or a Picanto, is going to want to move towards a sedan. But the problem is the price difference between that of a hatchback and that of a sedan. So while hatchbacks are now, at least in the Pakistani market, priced around what, 2.8 million up till what, 3.5, 4 million now, you have sedans that are priced way higher that start from 5 million. So the kind of jump that they're going to have to make is going to be of about ₹1 million, you see. So you know that there's the aspiration because you've spoken to people and that you've uncovered that insight. But then you also need to see how other sedans are doing it. So for instance, let's say there's the Honda City. The Honda City it's a great car. It's very comfortable. It's always been posed as like a perfect car for citywide driving. But what are they talking about? Let's take, for instance, the Toyota Yaris, which came out after they discontinued the GLI and XLI variants of the Corolla. So what is the Toyota Yaris talking about? And they're talking about style, and they're talking about about sort of conquering the road in like a youthful kind of way. So those are the kind of aspirations that they're trying to sort of reach out to. But then Alsman comes along and takes the perspective of like a different kind of perspective. So they're talking about upgrading from a hatchback to a sedan because they were priced at that point when they were launched in the market. So you see what's happening there? They were able to understand how their competition is communicating this message for selling the same kind of a product, and then that's how they decided on developing a message that is more connected with the audience. So market context, I think that's the first thing here that you want to be able to do after you've defined what your objective is understand what the market is like, how large is the market, how often are people buying these vehicles, for instance, in the case of our example, or how often are people how often are they interacting with the brands or the products that are being offered to them? And also, what are the companies or the brands who are your competitors? What are they saying? How are they saying it? Where are they saying it? Another very important tool for competitors analysis here is social listening. I think social listening is such an important thing to do when it comes to understanding what people want. Is you go and see on your competitors' social media presence or digital presence as to how are consumers reacting to what they're saying. So let's say someone talks about the power of dreams, right? And you have a consumer that comes along and says, "What kind of a dream are you talking about?" Or "What dream?" Or well, maybe they could be talking about the build quality. Hey, you talk about dreams, but the build quality isn't that great. So you sort of getting a sense of what people are looking for, even from your competitors. Like for instance, a certain car could be communicating great things, but at the end of the day, if the product isn't great, then no communication, no amount of communication is going to be able to do justice to it. And so when understanding what the consumer's pain points are, you're going to be able to understand your competitors as well. Okay, so just before I go forward, we've talked about a clear objective and we talked about the market context. But you see, I'd like to, and I'm sorry, I don't have this in slide form over here, but I do want to share this with you. And I think this is like, think of this as like a golden rule when it comes to advertising. Remember that there are always 5 different aspects to any communication strategy in the world. Any strategy that you develop will always have these 5 aspects, and you must ensure to include those aspects. Number 1 is always the market context, the one that I've just spoken to you about, the market context. Number 2, who you're talking to, understanding the who you're talking to. Third, what are you going to say? What are you going to say is the part of your entire strategy where you articulate your message. How you're going to say it is what is the creative manifestation of the message that you've developed. And number 5, where are you going to say it? So what are the platforms that you're going to be using? Which platforms are going to be important? Which platforms are going to be less important? And how you're going to essentially approach your entire campaign, your entire communications it's all entrenched within these 5 different points. Remember that. Number 1, the market context. Number 2, who you're talking to. Number 3, what you're going to say. Number 4, how are you going to say it? Number 5, where are you going to say it? Just keep this in mind. And our entire communication strategy is now going to start falling into place. Third, who are you speaking to? Like I mentioned, this is where the target audience comes in. Remember that there are 3 main aspects to your target audience, to your main demographic. I won't say demographic, but the kind of people that you're trying to reach out to. And you start thinking about, okay, well, I need to understand what this person wants, who this person is, and what is he looking for, not just so that I could create a message, but because I can think about how do I make an impact in his life. You see, when people want to buy a product, they will just go ahead and buy it. They don't need us to constantly nag at them with product details and brand details because people really don't have that kind of time. The average attention span is so low that people are constantly just swifting through their social feeds as well. So how do we essentially target that? And you do this by narrowing down, by segmenting the most ideal or the most likely people to engage with you and buy your product. Take Coca-Cola, for example. And you look at the communications of Coca-Cola and you think about, okay, well, what is the kind of communication that they're using? What are they saying? And what is the kind of imagery that they're using? And you think, okay, well, Coca-Cola has the Coke Studio, which is a lot of music, and their last season featured a lot of Gen Z artists, or artists that created music that appealed to Gen Z, at least in Pakistan. And then when you look at the communications or like the ads that Coke is creating, you see that they're talking about real magic, and then they're substantiating real magic by talking about connection between people, by talking about being united. But in terms of the tone of voice, in terms of imagery, you will constantly see that they are representing young people. Now, it's not like older people don't have Coke. Older people my grandmother loves Coke, but that communication is not meant for her. Not because she's not a primary consumer of Coke, but just because younger people are more likely to buy Coke as compared to older people. So you see, while because when you go to clients, a lot of clients will say our target audience is between the ages of 18 and 55. You see, that's the problem. An 18-year-old and a 55-year-old will not receive any message the same way. That's why it's important to narrow down your target audience. And that's where this part comes in. Who are you speaking to? Understanding and determining who your demographic is going to be. So including demographic. So demographic details include age, religion, if relevant, sex, location, their marital status, whether they're parents or not, and details like that. Now, those are all demographics. Psychographics are more about how do people think? What are their preferences? What do they want? So for instance, I could say young mothers aged between 24 and 32. And you see, that's a demographic, right? But if I were to enrich this target audience and further narrow down the kind of mothers I'm talking to, maybe I'd say new mothers between the ages of 24 and 32 who don't watch morning TV shows, or young mothers aged 24 to 32 who are also working. So you see what's happened there? You've completely segmented the kind of person that you're trying to reach out to through including a psychographic detail. Now, this is just one. You can have a range of psychographic details as to who is most likely to buy your product. And of course, behavioral aspects. What do they do? Are these people that play sports? Are these people that go out a lot? Are these people that like spending time with their family? Are these people that like spending time with their friends? Are these people that are frequent flyers? Are these people who drive on their own? Are these people who spend a lot of time at home? Are these people who are very outgoing? Are these people who are extroverts, introverts? There's so many aspects to the people that you're reaching out to that when we simply talk about demographics, we're actually losing out a huge chunk of being able to segment the kind of people that you're talking to or reaching out to. And this is where consumer persona also comes into play. So what is a consumer persona and how do you craft one? Imagine this. Imagine that a consumer persona is basically a character sketch of the ideal consumer. So let's say I've defined my target audience. Let's talk about milk, for instance. We're selling milk, and our primary target audience here that we've segmented and we feel are people who are most likely to buy our milk are young mothers between the ages of 24 and 32 who are who care about the family, who spend a lot of time at home, who are the decision makers, who are the ones that do the groceries themselves, for instance. And so I want to create a persona for them. So what do? Well, I think of an imaginary person. I think of a girl named Sarah. So Sarah is 27 years old, and she has a young boy of 3, and she lives in a joint family system with her mother and father-in-laws, and with her husband as well. And so I start defining her. I start talking about Sana used to be a very outgoing person, but now ever since she's got married, she tends to spend more time at home. She's a working woman who has taken some leaves from her workplace to take care of her family, to look after her newborn, who for instance, is very interested in or plays a crucial role in determining which products come at home. She's the one who decides which milk is going to be used to cook tea for her husband, which milk is she going to give her child with cereal, how often does she give her child milk. You see what I'm doing there? I'm just defining who this one person, Sarah, is by creating a persona. When you create a persona, you have very specifically identified, this is the kind of person I'm talking to. This is the kind of message that will appeal to them. Now, these are all, again, very academic aspects. I'm sure you guys have already learned about demographics, psychographics, and including behavioral details as well. But now let's talk about the real insights. Insights are like the holy grail for any advertising person. It's because insights allow you like a window into what people really want. Like, for example, take I think one of the best examples for a good insight is Surf Excel. Surf Excel is a brand in Pakistan that is owned by Unilever, and uh, that it's basically powdered detergent to wash clothes. And the kind of narrative that they've taken, the kind of message that they have is dirt is good, daag to achhe hote hain. It's an incredibly good campaign and it really resonates with a lot of people. But just imagine for a second this narrative: dirt is good. How can dirt be good? And how can a detergent company claim that? Imagine in a time when all detergent companies and all brands made dirt or made filth a villain and talked about dirt. Don't worry about dirt. We'll remove the dirt. The dirt needs to go away. There should never be any dirt on your clothes. They're constantly talking about that, right? Surf Excel comes along and says dirt is good. How does that happen? And how are they building that narrative? That comes from understanding the audience. So what they did is they took a deep dive into a very, 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 very interesting insight. What they've said is, what they thought is, what they saw essentially was that who are the people that make their clothes the dirtiest? Who are the people that who have a lot of stains on their clothes? Well, it's kids. Kids are the most likely people to get stains on their clothes, right? So again, most likely, please bear in mind. But hey, we can't communicate to kids because they're not the ones that are going to be washing their clothes. It's their parents that are going to be washing the clothes. Well, okay. So let's think about the moms. Well, what do the moms think about their children getting a lot of stains? Well, they hate it. They don't like it. And oftentimes they will not allow their kids to do something just because they might get a stain on it. Like, for instance, if the kids are wearing nice, nice, pretty clothes, we're not going to let them go to the playground and play, right? So that was one thing that came into the, that came out as an insight. And they thought, well, that's interesting. Why would moms not let their kids play just because they will get stains on? And then that's when they actually went out into the field and actually spoke to moms and asked them, would you not allow your kid to go to a playground and play just because they might get stains on? And while many moms said that, no, we would prefer that they don't do that, a lot of moms actually said that, no, they should be playing because that way they can be more active, and that way they can, they can do better. Their physical health will be better. And then the next question they asked was, but they're going to get stains. Is that a problem? And the moms were like, well, we don't like stains and we prefer not to get them. But just because of stains, we won't keep them away from playing out, because that's how they're going to learn and grow. And so that's where they uncovered this very interesting aspect about moms, that, well, if playing outside means the child develops and getting some stains, don't worry about the stains, because Surf Excel has you covered, you see? So if stains or dirt help your child flourish, then therefore dirt is good. You see, that's where the idea comes from. And that's where the big idea really is. This big idea that you will always hear in advertising makes up most of the what you're going to say part. This core insight, like I mentioned to you just earlier, comes from talking to people. There are so many ways that you can uncover these insights, not just having one-on-one conversations, but even using the traditional modes of research, like conducting focus groups, for instance. If you've conducted a well enough focus group, or if you've had a strong enough one-on-one conversation, well, you're going to uncover an insight that you can leverage. You see, anyone can get data. Getting data is not a tough thing, but extracting the right kind of insights, or being able to analyze that data in a way that allows you to craft your message, is what effective communication strategy is all about. That's where you decide what you're going to say. Once you have a strong enough core insight, like in Pakistan, when Kia, again another automotive company, when Kia was launching their Sportage, their idea for the entire campaign was different is good. Why would a car and SUV, like a compact SUV, say different is good? Where does that come from? And why is that their main message? That's because they had a very interesting insight. This what because the insight that they uncovered was after speaking to a lot of car buyers, they realized that Pakistanis are really hooked on to the three legacy brands of cars in Pakistan, which is Toyota, Honda, and Suzuki, right? And people are not moving on from that. People are too afraid of trying out a new car because they're too afraid that maybe the car's resale value won't be as great. Maybe the spare parts are not going to be as available. Maybe a lot of mechanics are not going to be available who know about this new car, who can fix this new car. So this was like a concern for people. And that's when Kia came in and said, hey, listen, um, being different isn't always easy, but hey, uh, it it helps you stand out. It makes you who you are. And they reached out. Of course, now a true Toyota or a Honda or a Suzuki enthusiast would not really move towards Kia just like that. So who they started talking to were the people who were actually open to that idea, people who like experimenting with new things, people who are more likely to invest in a different kind of car that allowed them a better experience if given the opportunity. And I think that's how you see how the target audience, defining that correctly and marrying it with your core insight, with your core message, your core idea, your narrative, helps you craft a compelling message there. In the case of Kia Sportage, different is good. That's where the narrative essentially comes in. Now, please bear in mind that, of course, due to time constraints, we're not taking a very deep dive into each of these different specific aspects. Like insight mining is a very in-depth aspect of communication strategies that requires different sessions and a lot of practice as well. But again, what I'm talking about is the gist of how you can craft it if you are able to uncover the right kind of insights using some of the different tools that I spoke to you about. And of course, then the big idea. Now, the question is, how do I craft this big idea? How do I come up with a creative line that becomes the pinnacle or the zenith of my entire campaign? Again, I'm going to refer back to insights. Your core insight, your main insight is going to be the fact, the very fact that allows you to marry your product offering with what people want or a certain situation. So let's say, like I gave you an example of Surf Excel. Let's say you have an insight that is also a very core desire of the consumers, right? Like for instance, let's go into a different category this time. Let's talk about shoes. Let's talk about shoes. Let's talk about Nike. Let's do it. So when Nike says just do it and reflects that in all of its communications, what they're essentially building on is people's will for outward representation of skill or motivation. So it's not just about feeling good on the inside, but also showing the world how amazing you are. That's what Nike essentially plays on. That's what the whole narrative is always about. Just do it. Just go ahead. We're here to enable you, right? How do you come up with a line like just do it? Is when you think about what do people really want? What is it that they're really looking for? Is it just surface level? Are they just looking to please the world? Is that it? Or is there something more than that? Is it about just showing the world, or is it about embracing the challenge? About not just being inspired, but inspiring the others. I think that's where the beauty of this entire campaign, or This line in itself, just do it, that's where it lies, right? That big idea that went on to become the tagline of the brand and a slogan, a rallying cry that Nike enthusiasts all over the world are constantly using and talking about. Finally, how you're going to say it. How you're going to say it is, I think, uh, this is where the most interesting part of your entire communication strategy comes into play. You start thinking about what are the different forms that this message can take. So, can this, if this message were to be communicated in the form of a video, what could I show? Could I show the story of someone who's just like my audience? Could I build on just the functional aspects of what I want to sell? Uh, could I showcase an inspirational story about, uh, again, about the narrative that I'm trying to build? What am I going to do? And then also, what forms am I? So, other than video, what other forms can I manifest my message in? In text form, if this were to be a print ad, what is the main headline or caption going to be? How am I gonna substantiate what I'm already saying? And what is the kind of imagery that I can use? What is the tone of voice that I'm going to take? What is the brand archetype that I'm going to pick up on in crafting my communications? How you're going to say it. It answers that question. Creative interpretation essentially comes from understanding the narrative in itself. Surf Excel, for instance, comes up with such great campaigns every year, and all of them talking about the same idea where it is good. So you have, let's say, one campaign in Pakistan was conducted with a brother doing something good for a sister, but gets a stain in the process. They crafted a message around that. And at another place, they talked about, or they represented a religious act, which is uh, during a time of Holi, you have like a Muslim child who wants to go to the masjid to pray, and you have his Hindu friend who helps him get to the masjid without getting any uh, any color on his clothes. Again, representing goodness, right? And so you see what they've done is they have a big idea that essentially is wide enough to be stretched to include other aspects such as goodness. If in the process of doing something good you get a stain on your clothes, doesn't that make the stain a good thing? Because it's helping you do something good, right? Hence, dirt is good. So you see what's happening there? You've thought about a very interesting way to manifest the same message, but in a different form. And that covers the how you're going to say it part of our entire. Finally, we have where you're going to say it. This is where the media mix comes in. Where do I want to primarily say what I want to say? So when thinking about your media mix, it's important to consider where your audience is, are spending most of their time, and also what platforms can you leverage to your best ability to be able to communicate a certain message. Like for instance, let's take Bacardi. Bacardi is a brilliant brand, and it's doing great around the world. They came up with this really, really, really cool campaign on Instagram where they featured they leveraged a feature of Instagram, which is the skip feature. So when you're on Instagram and when you have stories in front of you, and I have the case story, but I'll share the link with you guys, you can also take a look at those. I have a lot of different examples as well. What they did is they realized, and again, the insight there for them was people have a constant skipping culture. When you're on Instagram and when you're looking at stories, you're looking at a story, but you're also skipping, skip, 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 skip. So it's something that people generally they knew, and that was sort of part of their behavior. And they leveraged that by gamifying the experience. And what they did was, it's called the Instant DJ campaign. What they did was they created like the visual of a turntable and added small sounds to each of their stories. and put it up. So because people had this habit of skipping stories already, they would like every time the story would load up, they have the opportunity to play around with the music and create their own music just by clicking how many times they wanted to skip a track. So let's say there's a certain sound playing on story number 1, and there's a certain sound playing on story number 3 and 4. And using that skipping behavior function, they were able to sort of, communicate that, or engage people through this instant DJ idea. And again, ultimately their message, do what moves you, was communicated in that campaign. So you see what they've done there? It's not just about using all the platforms. It's about leveraging the right kind of platforms and also using those platforms to the best that platform can offer you. And then, of course, at the end of your communication strategy, when all of the execution takes place and everything happens, you have the monitoring and review. This is where analytics come into the picture. This is where performance comes into the picture. You tend to see what you've done, what message you used, and how well was that message received by the people, to what extent was it received, which of your creative assets, which of your communications were able to make an impact, which of those were not able to make an impact. They sort of give you insight into what you can do more, what you can improve, and what you should just let go of. Thank you. This brings us to the very end of our entire presentation, and I hope I'm on time.